Hey everyone, John Kernahan, Chairman of the United Tiny House Association, and today's Tiny House Talk is on renting, leasing land for your tiny house. Finn and I now have been living in our tiny house, beloved cabin right behind us, for over 8 years. Actually, we're approaching 8.5 years. And during this time, in the beginning, we leased land, and now for over 5 years, 6 years now, we've been on our own land that we've owned. So what we did first off was we leased land until we found the perfect piece of land that we could own and legally have a tiny house on. We got what was called a hunting lease. And the property owner allowed us to be there all year long, 24/7. Some hunting leases, you got to check them out. They only allow seasonal things, like you can only be out here for deer season. Or hunting leases are a really cool thing to look into. You just got to check it out. And again, you got to make sure where you're at, if you can. Now, the fortunate thing where we were at, even though that particular property wasn't specifically zoned to allow for tiny houses, there was nothing in the zoning that disallowed for tiny houses. It was an agricultural property. There's nothing out there in the zoning or in the county stipulations that said you couldn't be on the property and sleep on the property in RVs and campers and stuff of that nature. So we were able to do it. So why would one lease or rent land compared to owning? Well, the advantages in my mind on leasing and renting land is quite simple. In our case, if you can't immediately find land that you can buy and you have a tiny house, or you want to immediately or quickly go into a tiny house lifestyle, there is land out there that you can lease and rent. Boom. That was our solution. That's how we did it. Maybe you want to be transient. Maybe you don't want to be set up. Like we love having a home base. We love owning our land, these 16 acres here. But maybe your situation is you don't want to be permanently locked down somewhere. Maybe you want to travel around and move around. So you want to be somewhere that's short term and then move on short term, things of that nature. Maybe credit wise, financially, savings, liquid asset, etc. Some folks just aren't in a position to buy land at this time in their tiny journey. So renting is the immediate solution for them. Some people like to rent land because they like the community aspect, like we Casa, that are tiny house communities, or Eric Chu's facility out there in California. These are places that are from day one, they've been designed for tiny houses. And maybe that's your thing, that's why you want it. So advantages and disadvantages of leasing and renting. One, you can just do it. You can just get out there and do it, and you can start doing it very quickly. Now, different aspects. Now, one thing is that some people, they like being next to people. I've seen some tiny house communities and some RV parks that allow for tiny houses that, how should I put it? You're kind of on top of each other. Some people like that. Some people, they like a little bit more space. So that's something to look into. Something else that I like to tell people about or warn people about, I can't warn you enough about this. If you're going to rent some land, find out if it's legal to be in a tiny house on that land before you go get all set up, unpacked, get situated, maybe even do something permanent in regards to your sewage and your plumbing and stuff on the property, and then find out the hard way that you can't really do it. That sucked. You got to do it all over again. I can't stress enough, though, that if you're going to do a tiny house, if you're going to build a tiny house, if you're going to buy a tiny house, have a plan. Know what you're going to do once you're ready to take possession of that house, that you've got a place to put it. If you don't have, and if you're not planning to live on it, or if you can't live in it immediately, or if what you assumed you were going to do falls through, at least you can go and take it and put it in a storage unit place, store it for, say, a few weeks or a month, however long it takes for you to find your legal place. And leasing and renting is a good place to look into as a immediate option. A great place. Here's my little tidbit. Jill Canto, she has a website called searchtinyhousevillages.com. It's a mouthful, but it does exactly what it says. Searchtinyhousevillages.com. If you go to searchtinyhousevillages.com, everybody, let's say it together. tinyhousevillages.com.
Follow the bouncing ball. Search tinyhousevillages.com. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Am I showing my age on that one? Okay. But if you go to search tinyhousevillages.com, what Jill has done, she's made this amazing database of tiny house communities, and it has all these search parameters.
So you can look for a tiny house community in New Hampshire that allows pets, or, you know, and I'm spitballing on the criteria there, but I think she has a few dozen different parameters, criteria, but you can really fine tune the search parameters on that for what you're looking for, and it lists out the different type of tiny house communities out there.
So again, leasing and renting a location for your tiny house, it's a great way to get started. It's a great way to do it permanently for those who don't want to own land and don't want to be permanently set in a certain location, or just don't want the responsibility of having to maintain that land. So a lot of different options out there, a lot of different ways to go about renting and leasing a place for your tiny house and for your tiny house adventure to begin. And leasing and renting is a good way, is a nice start for a lot of people, and a permanent way to do things for people. So it's just one of the two options, leasing, renting, compared to buying and owning. And in our next talk, I'm going to discuss owning land and how to go about owning land and the pros and cons of owning land. So I'm John. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this, please join and like and follow our YouTube channel here. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at United Tiny House. And if you want the humorous, fun side of living tiny, follow Finn and I on Facebook with Tiny Talks, communicating with love and laughter. Thanks a lot. I'm John, and remember, do something big in your world by simply doing something tiny. Or excuse me, got to start all over again. Really? You think so? Think that's how it works?